What's going on, everybody? My name is Jordan. I'm the head coach here at SaberSim, and baseball is finally back. I wanted to record a quick video for you guys walking through some of the recent changes and improvements we've made to SaberSim in the last few months or so you're ready for opening day. Now, before we get started, I released a similar video at the start of the NFL season in September of 2022, walking through the past year of improvements then. So if you haven't been with us for a little while, I'd check that video out as well to support this one. That video is linked in the description of this one. As well, a lot of the improvements and things we've done to the app here are pretty big changes. Some of them deserve an entire video of their own. So I'm going to walk through features pretty quickly here just to give you an idea of everything that's changed, and then drop in the description links to videos that go into some of these features in a little bit more detail. But I've got plenty to get into here, so let's go ahead and just dive right in. First things first, there is an all-new subscription plan with SaberSim called SaberSim Pro. SaberSim Pro is for serious DFS players who want to improve their process and get the most out of our tools here. And it comes with a few different features. The biggest one is you have the ability to build up to 5,000 lineups at a time in a single build, which is going to improve the quality of your lineups and just give you a lot more room to work with in your pools. It also comes with features to upload totally custom data, so data for players that isn't a projection or an ownership projection, but it's just data that's useful for your process. You can create custom lineup ranking methods in a build screen if you'd prefer to use a custom calculation as opposed to something like SaberScore or projected score. And if you like to aggregate different projection sets or different custom projections or ownerships or things like that, you can upload multiple projection sets into the app and create weighted averages for these projection sets all on your own. In addition to these in-app features, you get access to an exclusive SaberSim Pro Discord channel and content that's exclusive to our SaberSim Pro subscribers that isn't available to anybody else. I definitely recommend checking out SaberSim Pro for this baseball season. If you're interested in learning a little bit more about this plan, there's a video in the description to this one that breaks down these features in a little bit more detail. One of the biggest new features in the app is our lineup rules section here, which replaces the old stacking and grouping rules that used to be available in the build settings. In the lineup rules section, you can create stack types, you can create player groups, manual or automatic groups, and you can create aggregate rules that list certain lineup parameters like projection or ownership and require that your lineups must be over or below those different parameters. Again, the lineup rules is pretty powerful. There's a lot you can do here, and there is another video in the description to this one that breaks these down in more detail. Late swap got some great updates as well. The big one is that when you're late swapping your lineups, you now have a pool to work with just like you do before lock. When you're late swapping your lineups, we'll take each of your lineups that you already have in your contests, lock the players whose games have already started, and now instead of just rebuilding each lineup once, we'll rebuild each lineup multiple times here to give you a pool to work with. It makes it much more easy to late swap, take advantage of updated information you didn't have at lock, but still have that pool there so you're selecting the best lineups from your pool, allowing yourself to diversify and take stands where you want to. In addition, our ownership projections now update as news is breaking throughout the slate. This is more impactful for a sport like NBA than it's going to be for a sport like baseball, but when there is big breaking news that comes out after the slate has already locked, our ownership projections will now update here to account for that news. We released a huge update to the overall build speed in the app, and this is one you really just have to see to believe. Building 500 lineups for an NBA slate, for example, here just takes a couple seconds generally, and even building the 5,000 lineups on the Pro plan, even with rules, restrictions, requirements for your lineups, is an incredibly fast process. If you haven't played DFS with SaberSim in a year or so, you are going to be blown away at how much faster builds run now. There's also been a change overall to how we handle ownership in the app. One thing that might immediately jump out to you is that the ownership fade slider has been removed completely. SaberScore has changed a bit, and there's different SaberScores here now for different slate sizes and contest sizes, and there's an adjusted ownership column here, which is a new ownership metric. I'm going to give a brief overview here, but again, there is another video in the description of this one that goes into these in more detail. First things first, we removed the ownership fade slider because it was affecting the sims and preventing the builder from building the best high upside lineups as possible. possible. Our ownership is now taken into account more heavily in the post build with these new SaberScore options here, which have been recently backtested and updated for all of our sports for the start of the baseball season. One other cool thing here is now SaberScore is not as much of a black box. If you always liked using SaberScore or maybe didn't trust it just because you didn't really understand what it was, you can click this eye icon now and actually see what the calculation is here for each of the different SaberScores for different slate sizes and contest types. The SaberScores do use adjusted ownership, which is a calculation of the ownership projection based on the individual player's variance. If a player is highly owned but low variance, in other words, they reach their projection fairly often and consistently, the adjusted ownership will actually be lower. We're counting that player's ownership as less because they're relatively good chalk. On the flip side, if a player is going to be highly owned but is high variance, their adjusted ownership is going to be higher than their average projection, saying that they're essentially bad chalk and that their ownership counts for more because they're not achieving their projections or their upside very often relative to that ownership. Again, this stuff is a little complicated, but it should make the quality of your lineups much higher right off the bat. And if you want to dig a little bit deeper, check out the video in the description of this one. On that note, we've done a lot of work to improve the quality of our ownership projections overall. The team has spent a ton of time on this in the past year, and we do a much better job now of assessing how the field is going to handle certain situations. No model is ever going to be perfect, but I'm really proud of the work that the team has put into our ownership projection models for all sports, but including baseball here this past year. And you should notice that in general, we're doing a much better job of picking up who the chalk is going to be on a slate, where some of the low-owned pivots are, and how the field is just going to navigate each slate. Another big change to the app is that Sim Precision is now called Sim Diversity, and it's a little bit of a different process working in the background. Now, again, this gets pretty technical and mathy. We actually did an hour-long show breaking down what Sim Diversity is and how it's different than Sim Precision, which, broken record here, is linked in the description of this video. But basically what it's going to do is it's going to do a better job packaging up sims to use for your lineups that better find the upside outcomes and the high ceiling lineups from your pool. For this one, you really don't have to do anything different. Just know that we're taking the buckets of sims we're using in a much more accurate way that represents how these games could be playing out. Min Uniques has now moved to the post build. You can find it at the top of your screen next to the number of lineups here. It works the same way you're used to. As you increase this, you are increasing the number of players that must be different when comparing any two lineups in your actual lineup set. In this example, I must have 3 players different amongst any lineup when comparing any two lineups in my set of 20 from each other. The main reason we moved it here is so it is less disruptive to our sims. What happens now is your pool of lineups is built first. We rank your lineups by the new SaberScore here to identify the best ones from the pool, and Min Uniques purely diversifies the actual lineups you're playing rather than every single lineup in your pool from each other. Again, this should just improve the quality of your diversification. It's easier to get more diverse lineups without reducing your lineup quality, but I did a big breakdown about diversification in DFS a couple weeks ago, and I've also linked that video in the description of this one as well. Percentiles have gotten a little bit of an update as well. Instead of using the individual player percentiles when sorting by a percentile in a build screen, we're now looking at the lineup percentile. And this is just a much better way of assessing what lineups actually have high upside. The way it used to work is when you selected 95th percentile, we would take the 95th percentile of each individual player in the lineup and show you the sum of all of those numbers. In reality, this was somewhat useful for finding high upside lineups, but you were looking at a really improbable situation, and frankly a situation that you didn't even need to win. What we ultimately care about is the lineup as a whole reaching those high ceiling outcomes here, which is exactly how the 95th and all of the new percentiles work. We're going into our sims to figure out what does this lineup score when it achieves its 95th percentile outcome, and you can use these percentiles in custom lineup ranking metrics. If you're on the SaberSim Pro plan, you can sort by them no matter what tier of subscription you're on, and these percentiles are generally used as a weighting metric here in the new SaberScores. We've also added new lineup filters to a build screen, so you can filter lineups that don't meet certain parameters in your build. You can just click the filter button, add a new filter, and either show or hide lineups based on virtually any data that is available to you here in the post-build screen. So for example, if I wanted to filter out lineups that had a projection under 260, for example, I can go ahead and easily create a filter here, letting me trim off lineups that I don't want to play that don't meet certain parameters. Now, believe me when I say these features really are just the tip of the iceberg. Our team has been working so hard the past few months to also release hundreds of other bug fixes, quality of life improvements, and some other minor features that's just going to make your experience building DFS lineups with SaberSim that much better. If you have any question about these new features or anything else related to building lineups on SaberSim, you can always reach out to us in our Discord server or email us at support@sabersim.com. I hope you're as excited as I am about the start of baseball this season. Thanks for watching and good luck.